Well, I'd say the main ones are education, the law, and religion.
Right.
The law, for example, is based on Roman law, unlike English law, which is an Anglo-Saxon type of law.
Okay.
So Scots law is much more similar, actually, to Spanish law and to the continental legal systems.
Okay.
Both in the way the laws are devised and in the way the justice system is actually structured. So that means that, for many different areas, people in England who want to practice law in Scotland and vice versa have to do extra qualifications, or they're not allowed to practice.
Gosh, okay.
Another one is education.
Right.
And again, that's to do with how the school system is structured. It's a little bit different. The national examinations that students take are different from England. They've got different names. They're taken at slightly different stages.
They're called the Highs.
Yes, and they're taken at a slightly different stage in the educational process.
Right.
And also, actually, the way the universities are structured is different as well. The degree system in Scotland tends to be slightly longer than the degree system in England. It's often 4 years, where in England it would be 3 years.
Okay.
And there are various other differences as well, And then also...
It's also free university in Scotland now, isn't it? Which is a massive difference with England. Well, at the moment, I mean, that's still... I don't know how long people have been paying in the UK. I didn't pay. I'm guessing you didn't pay.
I didn't. No, but my children paid. Let me think. So maybe people must have started paying about 15 years ago.
Right. Okay.
So it must be about 15 years or so since it started.
Because they're talking about stopping it again in England. Well, one of the there's an election on at the minute, and one of the parties are talking about sort of getting rid of tuition fees.
Yes.
Because I imagine it's a bit of a nightmare administratively trying to move between England and Scotland, which is ridiculous.
That's right. I believe there are lots of difficulties, and that in some ways it's actually easier for EU students to study in Scotland under various reciprocal agreements. But of course, needless to say, after Brexit, that's probably going to change as well.
That's going to change again.
Unless Scotland, of course, goes down the independence route inside the EU, but that's another conversation. And the other, just briefly, the other point that I mentioned is religion.
Okay.
That's another big difference. Again, these things are all for historical reasons. They're all for historical reasons. They all have their roots in things that happened, 300 years ago, round about the time that England and Scotland entered into a political union. Right. Okay. So, whereas in England you've got the Anglican Church, which is rather kind of Catholic in its practices. Right. Yeah. A lot of Catholics would recognise a lot of the rituals in the Anglican Church instantly. Yeah.
Which a lot of people don't realise how similar the official Anglican Church is to the Catholic Church.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very similar. And of course, the Anglican Church has the Queen as the head in a particular position. In Scotland, the national religion is much more Calvinistic. It's much more Protestant. It's much more austere, I would say. Having said that, there are large Catholic minorities in both Scotland and England. Yeah. So Catholicism is also, is also an important religious force there.
Sure. Okay. Alrighty. I think that's the end of that one. I don't know what's happened there. Is it? No, it is still going. Fantastic. Okay. So I'm going to ask you, does the Loch Ness monster exist?
Well, Mick, to be perfectly honest, your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, I know what my guess is.
Well, perhaps if I fill you in on some of the background to the Loch Ness monster. Loch Ness itself is a really enormous lake. It's really enormous. In fact, apparently, it contains more water than all the other lakes in England, Scotland and Wales put together.
Seriously?
Seriously, because partly...
I had no idea it was that.
It's really long.
Is that because the depth or the length?
It's both. It's very long. It's 22 miles long, which is about, 35 kilometres or something.
Yeah, around
But
there,
more importantly, it's the depth. It's enormously deep.
Okay.
And in fact, a few years ago, some sonar activities that they carried out showed the existence of some very deep caverns, types of sea caves, very, very deep under the loch, interconnecting and leading somewhere. And also, actually, the loch is fed by 7 rivers, 7 quite big rivers.
Okay.
So, an enormous amount of water comes into it.
Goes into it, yeah.
So I'm just saying all of that to establish that when people think of the loch, they're maybe thinking of something you can look out at, an area of water, and, are we going to see the monster or not?
Yes or no,
Yes or no. But for a start, it's actually an enormous area. And historically, apparently there have been reports of monsters in Loch Ness as far back as the 6th century. They're mentioned in the stories of St. Columba, who was one of the first missionaries to bring Christianity to Scotland. Okay. But it has to be said, anthropologists also point out that in the Dark Ages and in the medieval period, lots of cultures, especially Northern European cultures, have all kinds of myths and legends about creatures, water creatures and so on. And really, these are a bit like fairy tales. The purpose is to warn children and people of the dangers of going into deep water or going into places that it might be difficult to get out of. I think what people think of as the Loch Ness Monster now, that dates... I mean, there have always been stories, so, from time to time.
Modern sort of...
But the most modern manifestation of it dates from the 1930s. Okay. When, that's quite recent. Well, it's to do with photography. Because this is where the original famous photograph that looks like a neck sticking out of the water, a long neck. It was, I think, an English surgeon on holiday with his wife. They saw something strange in the loch. They stopped, took the photograph. In those days, of course, newspapers didn't carry a lot of photographs. So any photograph that was printed made a huge impact. And so the story then kind of spread from being more a local Scottish legend to everyone in the UK and in other countries hearing about it.
I've got family up in Scotland. Myself, nowhere near sort of Loch Ness. But my first sort of the first time I came across the kind of thing is a cartoon when I was a little kid, which I still end up referencing quite a lot. I'm in classes because it's called the Family Ness.
That's right.
You remember it? And
I know it very well.
There was happiness and loveliness and there's all your abstract nouns, friendliness. And I still end up using that quite a bit when I teach sort of proficiency students.
Well, I think it's quite cute. It's a nice idea. So, I mean, to go back to your original question, is there really a Loch Ness Monster? I don't really know. I mean, a lot of Scottish people say that, yes, there is a Loch Ness Monster, and you can definitely bank on seeing it. If you have a few of the local Loch Ness area whiskies beforehand, this might have something to do with the visions and the apparitions.
I got you. Excellent.
But I think the jury's still out on it.
Yeah, well, not from here.